Halloween has always been my favorite night of the year. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind where kids run from house to house with their candy bags. Parents linger at the end of the driveways, and everyone decorates their porches with pumpkins and fake cobwebs. Last year, Halloween fell on a crisp Friday night. I had set up my porch with orange string lights, a fog machine, and a bowl of candy right by the door. It was one of those nights that felt perfectly Halloween. A mix of chilly air and that faint smell of bonfires drifting through the neighborhood. Around 7 p.m., the trick-or-treaters started arriving in groups. Little kids dressed as superheroes, witches, ghosts. The usual. Everything was normal for the first couple of hours. But then, around 9:30, when the crowd started thinning out, I noticed a lone figure standing at the end of my driveway. At first, I thought it was just another late trick-or-treater. But something about the way they stood there felt off. They were wearing a plain white mask, like one of those expressionless theater masks, and a black hoodie pulled up tight over their head. They didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there. I called out, "Hey, come on up, there's candy left." No response. They just tilted their heads slightly, like they were studying me. Eventually, they slowly walked up the driveway, reached the candy bowl, and without saying a word, picked out a single piece. Then they turned around and walked away. Weird, but it was Halloween. I brushed it off. But about 30 minutes later, I saw the same masked figure again. This time, they were at the end of my driveway again, standing in the exact same spot, facing the house. I remember getting this uneasy feeling in my stomach. I asked, "Did you forget something?" Nothing. Just that same silent stare. I closed the door, turned off the porch light, a universal sign that we were done handing out candy. When I peeked through the blinds a few minutes later, the figure was gone. I went upstairs, turned on a movie, and tried to ignore the weirdness. But around 11:15 p.m., I heard 3 slow knocks on my front door. Not a kid's excited knock. This was slow, deliberate. I looked through the peephole. The same white mask stared back. This time, they were closer, standing right up against the door. No candy bag, no movement, just standing. I froze. My heart was pounding. I didn't open the door. I waited. After about a minute, they slowly backed away, turned around, and disappeared into the street. I locked every door and window in the house. The next morning, when I went outside, I noticed small, muddy footprints leading up to my porch and circling around the house toward the back gate. I checked my security camera footage. At around 11:30 p.m., the masked figure can be seen walking slowly around the perimeter of my house, stopping occasionally to look in the windows. The scariest part? When I zoomed in on the footage, I realized something. They weren't holding a candy bag at any point. They didn't come for candy. They came for something else. I sent the footage to the local police, but they never found out who it was. Nobody else in the neighborhood reported seeing the figure. Every Halloween since then, I keep the lights off early. And I never forget that blank white mask at my door. When I was in high school, there was this abandoned house on Cedar Street that everyone in town whispered about. The story was that the family who lived there vanished one Halloween night back in the 80s. The house had sat empty ever since. Windows boarded up, paint peeling, a rusted "for sale" sign barely hanging on. Every Halloween, kids dared each other to step onto the porch or peek through a window. But most of us were too freaked out to actually go in. 2 years ago, my friends and I decided to change that. There were 4 of us. Me, my friend Eric, his girlfriend Lily, and our buddy Chris. We were all about 17, bored, and full of dumb Halloween adrenaline. Around 10 p.m., after most of the trick-or-treating died down, we walked to Cedar Street with flashlights. The house sat at the very end, almost hidden behind overgrown trees. Even from a distance, it had that feeling, like the air got colder the closer you got. The front door was locked, but Eric found a broken window on the side and managed to climb through. One by one, we followed. Inside, the house smelled like mold and rot. Every step made the old wooden floors creak under our feet. I remember shining my flashlight down the hallway. All the wallpaper was peeling, and old family photos still hung on the walls. The faces were faded, but you could just make out the outlines of a man, a woman, and 2 kids. It made my skin crawl. We wandered through the living room, then into the kitchen. Everything was left exactly how it might have been decades ago. Dusty dishes still in the sink, a calendar on the wall turned to October 1984. Then we heard something upstairs. It sounded like footsteps, slow, heavy. Chris whispered, "It's probably raccoons or something." But we all knew it didn't sound like an animal. Eric, being the idiot he is, decided we should check it out. The staircase was narrow and steep, and with each step, the creaks got louder. When we reached the top, the air felt stale, like the house itself was holding its breath. There were 3 doors in the hallway, 2 bedrooms and what looked like a bathroom. Eric opened the first door, empty. Lily checked the bathroom, also empty. I opened the last door. It was a child's bedroom. The wallpaper had cartoon characters on it, faded to gray. In the corner of the room sat a single wooden rocking chair, and it was moving, not fast, just a slow, steady back and forth. All of us froze. Chris whispered, "Did anyone touch that?" Before I could answer, from downstairs came the sound of the front door slamming shut. We bolted down the stairs. The door we came through was now closed, and the lock was latched from the inside. We hadn't touched it. Panic set in. Eric started yanking at the window we'd climbed through earlier, trying to force it back open. Lily was crying. That's when I looked down the hallway toward the kitchen and saw a light, like the faint, warm glow of an old lamp. But we hadn't turned anything on. There was no power in the house. The light started moving, like it was being carried. We didn't stick around to find out who or what it was. Eric finally got the window open, and we scrambled out one by one. We ran all the way down Cedar Street without looking back. Later, when we caught our breath, Chris said something that still freaks me out. "When you looked at that light, did you see someone holding it?" I shook my head. He said, "I did. There was someone in the kitchen." We never went back to the Cedar Street house after that night. But every Halloween since, when I walk past it, I swear I see a faint glow through the cracks in the boards, like someone's still there, waiting. Halloween night 2 years ago, my friend Megan threw a small costume party at her house. Nothing huge, maybe 15 or 20 people tops. We were all in our early 20s, so it was mostly friends from college, a few neighbors, and some people we vaguely knew from work or class. Megan's house had this cozy 2-story layout, with the living room and kitchen downstairs and a narrow staircase leading up to a couple of bedrooms. She decorated everything with orange lights, fake cobwebs, and candles in pumpkin holders. Music was playing, people were drinking, laughing. It was a chill vibe. I went as a skeleton. Megan was a witch. Most people had at least some kind of costume on. The night started out perfectly. But around 11:30, I started noticing a guy in a plague doctor mask standing near the corner of the living room. He wasn't really doing anything, just sort of standing there, watching everyone. At first, I figured he was a friend of someone else. Everyone was in costume, and Halloween parties always have that one quiet person. But after about 20 minutes, I realized I hadn't seen him talk to a single person. He wasn't drinking, wasn't dancing, wasn't on his phone, just standing completely still, facing the crowd. When I asked Megan who he was, she frowned and said, "I thought you invited him." That was my first red flag. I tried to keep an eye on him after that, but people started leaving, music got louder, and I got distracted. Then, around midnight, I went upstairs to use the bathroom. As I was washing my hands, I heard floorboards creaking outside the door. When I opened it, I saw the plague doctor guy standing at the end of the hallway, just staring at me. The hallway was dimly lit, but I could clearly see the long, pointed beak of his mask silhouetted against the wall. I said something like, "Hey, you okay?" But he didn't respond. I took a step toward the stairs, and he took a step toward me. I felt my chest tighten. There was no one else upstairs. Everyone was downstairs by then. I hurried down the stairs, trying not to show how freaked out I was. When I told Megan, she looked around. But the guy wasn't in the living room anymore. We checked the backyard, the front porch, nothing. A few minutes later, I was helping her bring some trash bags to the kitchen when we both heard a loud thud upstairs. It sounded like someone had slammed a door. Megan grabbed a broom like it was a weapon, and I went up first. When I reached the hallway, every bedroom door was wide open, except one, Megan's room. I slowly pushed it open. It was empty. But the closet door was closed. When I opened it, the smell of sweat hit me. Someone had been in there recently. Megan called the cops after that. They did a full sweep of the house and the yard. No sign of forced entry, no broken windows. But when we checked the back door, the lock was busted from the inside. It was like whoever it was had already been in the house, maybe before the party even started. To this day, none of us know who the plague doctor guy was. Nobody claimed to have invited him. He doesn't show up in any of the party photos except for one blurry shot in the background, standing completely still near the kitchen. I've been to dozens of Halloween parties since then, but I always make sure to lock every door before it starts.